NATO has promised to defend any of Yugoslavia's neighbours should they come under attack from President Milosevic. On the final day of their summit in Washington, NATO leaders offered military protection and economic aid for 7 countries in the region. The Kosovo conflict has dominated the Washington summit, which was intended to mark NATO's 50th anniversary. Our correspondent Tom Carver is there.
This weekend, NATO underwent something of a quiet revolution. NATO was founded as a purely defensive alliance, promising never to attack unless threatened. But now it has given itself the right to intervene in international crises. Whether this new doctrine survives will depend entirely on what happens in Kosovo. This has been the biggest gathering of heads of state in Washington since President Kennedy's funeral, a show of strength designed to intimidate Mr. Milosevic. Today's meetings concentrated on the so-called frontline states, the 7 nations bordering Serbia and Kosovo. NATO needs their help in fighting Mr. Milosevic and is promising them as yet unspecified amounts of economic and financial assistance, the details of which will be worked out at a meeting in Bonn next month.
We are committed to working with you and with multilateral institutions to ease your emergency needs and help you with your debts. You want a better future for your nations and your region, and there as well, we are committed to help.
Today, yet more Apaches landed in Albania. The frontline states are crucial staging posts in this war, and NATO has now promised to protect them from attack, an additional burden which will almost certainly require additional troops.
Milosevic is a pariah now in his own territory, in his own backyard, in his own region. He is someone who each one of them recognizes stands against that vision of a modern democratic Europe.
The Kosovo crisis has left these frontline states with economic and social problems which are going to take years, if not decades, to resolve. NATO has promised that whatever happens, it'll be around to pick up the pieces. But that may be a greater undertaking than anyone at this summit yet realizes. Tom Carver, BBC News, Washington.
Well, our World Affairs editor John Simpson joins us now from Belgrade. John, this promise by NATO of protection and aid for the neighbouring countries, what effect is that likely to have on President Milosevic?
I think it's bound to emphasise the whole sense of being alone here, being entirely isolated. The central message is that he is on his own, and that hopes that, expressions of solidarity from countries like Greece or even Russia will actually amount to anything in practical terms. Those hopes must be doomed to disappointment. I think that's the only lesson that can be drawn from this.
John, there was also a call today from NATO for those who are democratically minded in that region to start speaking their mind, showing their colours. Any sign of that?
Yes, interestingly tonight on television, Vuk Blaskovic, who's the vice premier, he's the man that led the big demonstrations against President Milosevic a couple of years ago and then agreed to go into the government. And he went on television tonight and set out what looked like a clear alternative to President Milosevic's line. He said that he was in favour of having a UN force in Kosovo. He warned people that Russia wouldn't do anything to help them. And I think perhaps the most important of all, he told them that at some stage all of this would be over and they'd have to get on with the countries of NATO again. He said that all the talk that you get here endlessly on television about NATO being barbarians and neo-Nazis and aggressors, that was no good for the future. It seems to me we may just possibly be seeing the start of some kind of more rational alternative to the sort of all or nothing, the crash and burn approach.